In this house out there.
Hello. I see some people survived the pub crawl last night. I guess it's not too surprising. CCP gives Wormhole Space one of the worst possible time slots. Very first thing right after the pub crawl. I don't think this is being streamed and the recording probably won't show it, but we're not as packed as we wish we were, and looks like half the crowd's barely here, but we're going to work with it. So my name's ExookiZ, and this is going to be my Wormhole recap presentation called A Game of Holes Year 9. We've had Wormhole Space for 9 years now, if you can believe it, and stuff still happens there, contrary to increasingly popular belief on Reddit. It's not quite the desolate wasteland that some people would have you believe, but we'll get into that. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about me. I'm going to have a breakdown of month to month, a little bit about what's been going on, the different groups moving around and killing things. I've got some graphs, some charts, and we're going to talk about some numbers that hopefully is going to be exciting. Now that I've been doing this a couple years, I've got longer trends than I'm able to show everybody. And then I'm going to just talk a bit about what's been going on most recently and what Wormhole Space is looking like. And after that, we'll try to open up the floor for some Q&A. So briefly about me, I've pretty much only ever done wormholes. I joined Wormhole Space in June 2009, so just shy of 9 years of doing Wormhole Space. I'm the CEO of TD-SYN. It's all TD-SYN's ever done. We're a wormhole corp. Sometimes we kill things, sometimes you kill us, sometimes we're mining rocks. And I've lived in all parts of Wormhole Space. My corp has dabbled and lived in every single one, some much longer periods of time than others, but I have done a bit of everything. So I like to think I have an idea of what's going on. Not necessarily the most. There's definitely a couple people out there with better ears to the ground than me, but I really enjoyed talking to everybody about what we're doing, so we're going to go show you some of that. So real quick, the numbers that I'm using for this presentation, I always get questions afterwards like, how'd you come up with that? I use the kill dumps from the monthly economic reports. If you didn't know, every time Quant posts a dev blog, soon to be CCP Larrikin, there's an Excel spreadsheet in that has every single ship that died, period. I use that rather than Zkill because there's a lot of wormhole corps actually who don't have their kills sourced to Zkill. So if we just use the Zkill numbers, we get some somewhat inflated numbers, as well as we completely miss smaller corporations that maybe aren't as killboard focused. I also get to see every single time one of you dies to a drifter, which doesn't always show up on Zkill, so you can't escape the presentation, we know. I will note, though, the ISK values, they're lower than Zkills. So across the board, you might say, I know we killed more than that. I'm sure you did. On average, I spot checked about 30 different kills versus Zkill. These numbers are between 10 and 15% lower on average, sometimes bigger depending on what it was. Sometimes they're pretty close. But that's affecting everybody, so if you're using these to kind of compare stuff, that's 10% low for everyone that we're talking about here. So it's equal opportunity making your killboard look worse. So this year, in the past, I've used 10 billion ISK as a threshold of where I'm considering corps kind of out there PvPing and where they're not. By no means is this going to cover everyone. It turns out that if I tried to use 10 billion ISK a month this year, we would never finish because Wormhole Space, believe it or not, has a lot more people killing things in it than it did last year. I raised the threshold to 15 billion ISK, and I still struggled with some of these months. As you'll see when we get to some of these, there's still a lot of corporations there. So what I'm going to show next is we're going to go month to month. Last year, my presentation ended at March, so I started this one in April. The March data for this past March came out after I had to put this presentation together, so I'm going to talk about March, but I don't have all the data of March included. I'm not sure if anything important really happened in March, though, so we're not really missing that much. So what I did is every month I made up a list of all the corporations that killed at least 15 billion a month only in wormhole space and final blows, sorry. So what that does mean is if we had 2 corps and they both killed a carrier, only one of those corps technically got credit for the carrier. So if you're a corp that goes hunting with other groups a lot, you might have got shafted on some of these numbers, and I'm sorry, but that's just how I did the numbers. I did everything by corps rather than alliances. So occasionally you might see an alliance logo pop up more than once. I did try to go back and clean that up to fix it, but there's a couple times that happens, especially in some of the multi-corp alliances that might have Hull Control being one of the big ones. There's a lot of corps in Hull Control. They're all PvPing frequently independently. I tried to make sure I fixed all their logos to be their corp logo, but there might be a couple that slipped out. There's a lot of logos in these slides. So at the end of my presentation last year, these were all the corporations that were killing 10 billion ISK a month as of March of last year. Now, keep in mind, I did raise the bar to 15 for this presentation, so a couple of these groups might be still around, but they might not have grown quite to 15. So we'll fast forward a year, and we got this. So of that list, I crossed out the different groups that aren't quite around or maybe aren't as active. If you're looking and you're like, my corp's totally active, what are you talking about, Exo? Maybe you just had a crappy February. I don't know. But if you've got a red X over your face here, your corp failed to kill 15 billion ISK in February 2018. You're going to see some repeat names here. You're going to... I'll admit there's some corporations that get a bit more face time than others, and it's not necessarily because they actually PvP more. These are our corporations across wormhole space that killed 15 billion ISK or more in almost all of those cases, considerably more than 15 billion ISK a month, every single month that my presentation covers. What that also means is I don't have any of these groups in the next slide. So if it makes you feel better, you can just pretend that your corp is there in every slide, but if I did it that way, we would never have enough room for all of them. So these guys are here all the time, killing stuff constantly. So you're just not going to see their names again for a little bit, though. Similar story with these groups. These are the corporations that killed... that might have missed a couple months. They're around, they're active, they're out there killing stuff, but they might have had some slow months. Another group, a little bit slower. A couple of these you're going to see flickering in some of the other months. These guys I did include in some of the slides because some of them weren't constantly around, or they had some slow months, or they died somewhere. So moving into March. In the month of March, we had 3 corporations. Mouth Trumpet's been around a lot longer, but March of last year is roughly when they started getting, they consolidated out from Redfire and Jank into Mouth Trumpet. So based on the kill data, March is when Mouth Trumpet, as a group, first showed up as constantly killing 15 bill a month. Same with Partisan Squadron and the House of Asterion. I'm not going to read you all of these names because fortunately, as we move through some of the slides, there's a lot, and if I sat here reading them all for you, we'll definitely run out of time. EVE Uni had a slow month. You're going to see them appear and disappear a couple times. Still around, but they're not constantly the PvP killing machines that maybe they want to be. I'm not sure how many of us expect them to be super elite PvPers because it's EVE Uni, but they are around and they are killing things. April, we've got a couple more. We've got some that you're going to see a couple of the groups down in that bottom. So the green, I forgot to mention, the green is they killed 15 bill a month and they didn't last month. That was kind of the bar for these slides. Every time they shifted from not killing 15 bill to killing, they're up in the green. And same thing, if they killed 15 billion last month but they didn't this month, you've got it here in the red. Closest I could kind of get for a SOV map. What I'm hoping you'll get out of these month slides as we roll through is that the landscape is moving. We have those groups that I showed earlier. These groups, these 3 slides. These guys are always here, always shooting stuff. And most of the people that are making up these slides, some of them have come and gone, and some of them are just kind of hovering around that 15 bill mark, and that's why you'll see them kind of flickering in and out. We had a much busier May. We had a lot of corps showing back up. I'm sure you'll recognize some of these. Some of these are newish, and some of them have been around for a while. Inner Hell tell me that they're super active, and they always have been, but the kill board says that's a lie, so they lose. You've got a couple other groups here. Whole Violence, Doom Gen, New Union Yacht Club. You're going to see them appear again later. As we move into the summer, what's funny is we'll get into June, and we'll see a lot of corps dying out. It's not that these corps are all necessarily dying, but a lot of corporations have pretty slow summers. Some corps have busier summers. Some of the green guys we see up there were actually only really busy in the summer. And then we have this swath of people here in the red that slowed down. Maybe it's because they went outside. It can be scary to go outside some months, but it's a bit more tolerable in the month of June, depending on where you live. June's the first of one slide where I needed a whole second slide just to finish fitting everybody. There's a lot. You're going to notice this trend where we're going to keep seeing faces that maybe we haven't seen before, and there's definitely a lot of movement. Getting into July, we've got a bunch of corps. Some of those you pretty much just saw a slide ago. Same deal. We have a lot of groups slowing down for the summer. Some groups busyish during the summer. I'll note this July holds the wormhole record. Only Keepstar destroyed in the month of July. Hard Knocks, Laserhawks, and a bunch of different other corps that some were invited and some just kind of managed to get in there. Managed to shoot and kill Inner Hell's Keepstar in the C6, which currently holds the record for the only Keepstar to die in a wormhole. And Inner Hell's Keepstar, which they will also tell you is not theirs because they cleverly transferred it to a different corp before it actually got shot at. But it is definitely Inner Hell's Keepstar. Holds the record as the most expensive kill in all of New Eden. Depending on, it had Tech 2 rigs on this Keepstar. So I'm not sure what number Z-Kill has it at. It kind of moves around, but it was just shy of $1 trillion ISK for 3 Tech 2 rigs, a Keepstar hull, and the fittings. So it probably, if we did it back again today and had Tech 2 Keepstar modules, it probably even crossed that trill threshold. And it definitely did, including what fell out of it, I'm sure. But the most expensive thing ever killed died in a wormhole, and it died in July. Again, we have to have a whole second slide because there's just a lot of movement over the summer. Corps bouncing around. Maybe you recognize some names, maybe you don't. So this is one of the months where Tempest Legion decided that to make themselves better, they could just make a new corp and add a dot to the end of it. I'm not sure where that trend came from, but this isn't the first time they're going to do it. Or this is the first, but not the last time that they're going to do it this year. So Tempest Legion died just because they reformed as Temporary Insanity dot. We move into August, and we see a swath. Inner Hell decided that since they lost their Keepstar, they'd go shoot stuff for a little bit, so they did that. We've got a bunch of different corps. Again, you're going to keep seeing Stryker Industries, EPI Center Syndicate, Viper Fleet. A lot of these corps, Out of Focus, Static Noise. I'm not sure why, Jaded killed some stuff this month, but it's kind of one of the last months they killed stuff since they died this month. We got a lot moving on. Moving into the fall, now we're back to seeing more green than red, so that's always good. Summer's ending. It's getting scary to go outside again, so everybody just logs into EVE. And you see, Inner Hell gave up shooting stuff already. Jaded's now dead. They're not going to show up again. Unfortunately, we lost a couple decent groups here that also aren't going to come back. Mass Collapse and Static Noise, you're not really going to see them anymore. But on the positive side, we've got all these other corps back out there shooting stuff, so that's always good. October, we had a bunch of different corps moving around. This is when Shekel Squad also evicted Worm Bear, one of the other more notable evictions taking place. After this month, you're not going to see Operation Worm Bear anymore. Some of these corps you might note Oh, there's Temporary Insanity. That didn't last long. Hateful Intent also managed to have a month of PvP before that got really hard for them and they moved out to low sec. So they're going to be back later, though, so I guess it's okay. A couple corps that you really might not recognize. I had to do some digging to even figure out who Edge of Existence was. Same deal with Beyond the Gates and Old School Space Benders, which is funny because both Beyond the Gates and Old School Space Benders have actually been in Wormhole Space for years. But they're small, they're not super social, and they're just kind of doing their thing. Might just be bears with teeth. It's hard to tell with some of these corps if they're just Care Bears that manage to shoot stuff successfully when you try to kill them, or if they're just not super active at hunting. Way more green for the month of November. Again, it's getting especially scary to go outside, so even more people are logging into EVE. You've got Adhocracy playing the Let's Annoy Exo by dying and coming back every other month so that we show up on every slide. If that's a marketing trick, I'm not sure it will work. But they did manage to be on almost all of my slides, so good for them. EVE Uni's back. They decided to come inside and log in. Interhill decided to shoot stuff again. Pandemic Horde is on here. They killed a bunch of things this month, so good for them. They probably won't stay up too long there, but they're out there. And we've got a bunch of other corps that you hopefully recognize. December, we did see some groups disappear. House of Asterion's gone. Mass Collapse is gone again. Pandemic Horde managed to go kill things for 1 month and then decided Wormhole Space is scary and stopped trying. Bunch of other corps that we see bouncing around. We got Mind Games, Dependent on Pilots. Hateful Intent's back from low sec because they figured out it was terrible. Partisan Squadron, whole bunch of faces that we love and recognize. December was busy. I had to have 2 slides for this. Voidlords are dead. Turn Left, I'm not really sure what they were doing. They just had a month where they killed a bunch of stuff and showed up, but that was the only really month that they did a lot of Wormhole PvP. Short Bus Window Lickers, which I just got to say is a really good name. And Interstellar Nuclear Penguins, also a fun name. January, continue lots of green. Hopefully you're seeing this trend where there has been more green than red for most of these months. Almost done since my presentation is going to end at February. But we got lots of dudes there. Yep. So this is the last month slide that I've got for movement here. Again, more green than red. Some faces we really haven't seen in a while. Air Force, Special Ops, Navi, Outlaws, White Syndicate. You Only Wormhole Once from Exit Strategy. These are all groups that have been around for a long time, but they've really started killing stuff again here. Shadows in Space is another one that's been around for ages, but for whatever reason, we're seeing there's a renaissance with a lot of these corps showing back up. So that's what we've got now. This is all the corps that killed at least 15 billion ISK a month in the month of February, which you'll note is considerably more than we had last time. We started at 49, lots of corps died, lots of corps came around. We've got 68 now, and if I lowered that threshold to 10, we would actually have 95 corps that killed at least 10 billion ISK. So hopefully that helps you understand. If we just under 15 is a lot more corps, but 95 corp logos is really hard to fit on a PowerPoint slide, so we're just going to go with that one. All right, so diving into some numbers. So where are we at compared to last year? Last year I had this exact slide where we talked about how many corps. Over the span of this presentation, over 9,000. It was like 9,033 corporations killed at least one thing. Now that's a pretty low bar. Definitely couldn't fit 9,000 corporations on these slides. 6,368 of those corporations killed less than 10 things. Last year, that was 4,200 that killed that. So what you're going to see on most of these numbers is we've got more corps in almost all of these categories. We have a slightly smaller group of corps that killed 11 to 10, more corps that killed 20 to 50, and most of these other groups, 366, killed 51. The notable thing is down here at the end is we actually fewer corps killed over 1,000. Barely, we went from 84 to 79, but the second highest category there, we went up from 57, we grew up to 85. So there's a lot more corps up there that are just PvPing more. There's more corps shooting more things, and that's just good. What do the kills look like? So this probably isn't a super surprising graph, but over the span of this, that's the kills, how many things just died. Regardless of what ship it was, regardless of how much it cost, this is pretty typical. It actually follows pretty loosely EVE in general. You can see that the summer is pretty quiet, spiking up from last year's March. We are past last year's March already in February. I do not have this past March in this data, but I can tell you, since I do know what the number is, this past March, last month, set the record for wormhole space kills. If we want to look at this over the past 2 years, here's that same graph with the previous 12 months. If you're wondering what happened in that big spike in the middle, that's alpha clones. When they added alpha clones to the games, the kills in wormhole space just skyrocketed. Wingspan was just killing every heron that came through every B274 constantly. So what I would note is that overall, our summer slimp, though, was higher than last year's summer slimp. So it looked really low, but if we compare it to the whole year, then we can see that even in our quietest month, we were killing more things than we were last year. I don't have it on the graph again. March is over 50,000. So if you look at where the top of this chart is, March is even higher. March killed more than our highest peak, which was in December of 2016. So last month was the busiest month for kills in all of wormhole space history. I don't have this graph going all the way back to 2009. The data gets a bit fuzzier the farther back we go, but I did check this going back to 2013, and that is a fact. This graph pretty much rises constantly over time, even though it might not feel like it for some of the long-term wormholers, but March was very busy. So let's see that same graph with ISK. So you'll note that comparatively, our June and July summer slump was really low on the kill count, but the ISK never quite dumped quite as high. Expensive ships are still dying. We just saw Wingspan killing fewer herons those months than they did in the others. So what we see here is we've got that dip and it going back up. I'll note that even right here, February, that's a record for ISK destroyed for wormhole space. March blew that away by adding another trill. In the month of March, in 2018, wormhole space, for the first time ever, destroyed more than 6 trillion ISK. So you guys have been busy, because it wasn't me. So here's that same graph comparing adding another 12 months. So you can see the kills are going higher. So is the ISK. Our peak for my last presentation was in January, just shy of 4 billion. And we've had 3 at 4, if we include March, months where we swept right past that. Where we topped 5 trillion in February, whereas before we'd barely ever broken 4. And now we've already shot right past that and we killed 6. So some things that have changed, though. Some of these might be a little surprising for you. This is the class breakdown. People complain to me every year that the colors never match the wormhole classes, and that's very true. But I actually made them match real nice, and it got really ugly. So I just let PowerPoint tell me what colors would look good, since Clippy knows what he's doing. So we've got ISK on the left, ships on the right. Probably not too surprising. Class 1 space has never been super busy, neither is Class 6 way up at the top there. But what you might notice is C5 space isn't quite as busy as it used to be. I don't have last year's charts here, although I did compare them. C5 space shrunk in regards to its share of kills and its share of ISK. You know, we can meme all day, but the statistics don't lie that C2, C3, and C4 is increasingly where most of the PvP is happening. It might be smaller PvP. You'll note that C5's ISK share is considerably larger than its kill share. When things do die in a C5, they're almost certainly more expensive, both because you don't see as many rolling carriers getting caught by Laserhawks and dunked on in C3s than you do in C5s. And Hard Knocks isn't ganking your sight running fleet as often or as inexpensive ships down in C2 space. But, you know, so these are the charts. If you want data on this more after, I'll be uploading all of both my presentation and all the data that I put this together for onto Google Drive for everybody to access if you want it. But that's what wormhole space looks like class by class. CCP might want to look at it because, you know, if you were talking to Fozzie at the Wormhole Roundtable, think it's increasingly obvious that some of the devs don't understand what's happening in wormholes. But then again, they put us at 11 in the morning after the pub crawls. So we know where their priorities are. So those are the class comparisons. So finally, I'm going to wrap up here and just talk about what's been going on most recently. It would be silly. So earlier I joked about nothing really happening in March. If you aren't familiar with Wormhole Space, then you might not have got the joke. March saw the eviction of Pos Party from their C4 named Hydra by a coalition of Shekel Squad, Wholesale Operations, and Hull Control. There's a lot of notable things here. One, it saw some of the largest fights Wormhole Space has ever seen in regards to the people involved. The total count for the final battle exceeded 800 pilots, which is big. I think it's fair to say that we're approaching stuff that you don't really see in Wormhole Space much, because if you tell somebody, oh yeah, Wormhole Space just had a big fight with 800 people, they're like, no, it didn't. But it did. I mean, there's some people in the room that were probably there. That is definitely one of the things that helped push us up to that new height. I mean, like I said, March had record ISK, record ships being destroyed. You've got sizes of corporations continue to push new boundaries. It's not uncommon for some of the largest wormhole corporations to be pushing 50 people in their top game fleets when they're clashing. I'm not going to dig into it too much, but I thought it would be worth noting that if you also haven't ever seen the Reddit threads, Laserhawks and Hard Knocks both possess a super fleet that the exact numbers of which I'm not supposed to share with everyone, but you can definitely look it up if you look at some of the stuff they've been killing. Their groups, Hard Knocks especially, possesses more supers than a considerable amount of smaller nullsec alliances now, which they're using to terrorize Rorquals mainly. You know, because Hard Knocks can't shoot stuff that doesn't shoot back, so you know how it goes. So it's just, you know, we're pushing and opening new chapters in Wormhole Space. If we went back 3 years and said, one day some Wormhole Corps are going to be dropping supers and titans on people in nullsec and they're going to be getting dunked and then crying about it, you'd probably say I'm crazy. Well, that's happening. Just 2 days ago, I think it was. You know, time gets fuzzy when you're at FanFest. Hard Knocks and Laserhawks killed an Erebus, and they had their own titans around the kill mail. And you're like, Wormhole Corps don't have titans. Well, they do now, so rewrite your history books, I guess. Wormhole Space is still probably recognizable, but it's important to note that it's a very different place than what it was years ago. I mean, we just talked about how busy it is. There's more corps, there's more people. And the largest chunk of that is also just pushing new boundaries that people are starting to accuse some of us of just being nullsec blobbers that live in a wormhole. You know, we've got... ISK Destroyed has consolidated in the sense that last year it took 15 corporations to make up a quarter of all ISK being destroyed. Now it only takes 8. So that's some big movement. And keep in mind, the ISK destroyed keeps going up. So these, like the same big groups, the amount of how much PvP they're contributing to wormhole space has increased. So we can get 1/4 of all ISK value destroyed between your top 8 wormhole corps. But same token, kills have spread out. They're killing the expensive stuff, but it now takes 18 corps make up the 20% of all the kills, and it used to be 23. Oh, that's probably actually consolidation as well, and I'm bad at numbers. But you know, everything is going up. The big groups are doing even better at killing things, except we've got a lot more corps out there that are also killing things. So I'd say that's a win-win. And a number that I am extremely proud to be able to share with people, because I think this might boggle some of your minds actually. I did some number crunching on all the ISK dying in EVE total. On average, 10% of that dies in a wormhole. 10%. Last month, and February as well, it was just over 13. Maybe that's surprising to you, maybe it isn't. For some context, the last time CCP gave me some numbers, wormhole space made up about 5% of the player base, but that 5% of the player base does 13% of all the ISK destruction. So we're flying big ships, we're killing big ships, and everybody already knows this, but we're also just better than everybody else. So there you go. So wormhole space is big, it's busy. If you take nothing away from my presentation, I want you to understand that wormhole space is continuing to get bigger and busier. You know, EVE is dying memes all over the place. Wormhole space is not dying. That's what I wanted to talk about. We talked about me, some numbers, some history, so what's going on in wormhole space, and I don't know if they brought the mic out yet, but I'm happy to answer questions, and I want to thank everybody for making it out at 11 in the morning after the pub crawl. Thank you, guys. Is the mic there? Oh, it is. There you go. Anybody got questions? I know wormhole space is spooky and mysterious, and some of us don't know how to roll frig holes, so.
So just a quick question. We're trying to move into a new wormhole, and we're trying to set up a home defense fleet. I was thinking armor rattlesnakes. What are your thoughts on that?
So there is someone from Shekel Squad. There is someone from Postpart. Well, Shekel Squad could also share some insight into armor rattlesnakes themselves. But there is someone from Post Party in the crowd. But I don't think it'd be nice to drag him out here to have him explain armor rattlesnakes. I would note that since you're moving into a pulsar, armor rattlesnakes are probably an especially bad choice. They've been tried already, so it wouldn't even be very original of you, and they didn't do very well. So I would advise against that. You know, if you want to go with strange and unique fleet comps, I would suggest, you know, you could go with shield battens or
Shield battens with artillery sounds great.
whole tank Macarials are very good, I hear. So, you know, they're really hard to punch through all that hole with all those bulkheads.
Well, thank you for your suggestions.
In case the joke was lost on people, Post Party's initial home defense fleet from the big eviction from last month was armor rattlesnakes. It performed relatively poorly against the Macarials that were brought to fight it.
All right, you were speaking about the ISK destroyed in March this year.
Mm-hmm.
How much is that, like Astra houses and Fortisars and that kind of stuff?
It varies month to month. It would definitely be astute to point out that, February was the big month of let's burn down all the low power structures. So it's for sure a chunk of February and March is that. I don't think I ran the calculation for March. In February, about 17% of all that ISK was structure hulls. It's also important to note, but very difficult for me to kind of separate in the data, is a lot of the ships that died there were also probably ships that fell out of said structures and people chose to blow them up rather than take them as loot. Using CCP's data, it's kind of impossible to separate the two, whether or not this died in a fight or just died because it fell out of an Astro House and someone shot it. So it's for sure. I would also say that it's definitely true that overall the ISK being destroyed in wormhole space is in part due to the fact that structures are just more expensive. When an eviction used to happen and you'd sweep through a system and just blow up a bunch of passes, a single Astro House costs, depending on what passes they were using, it costs the value of several passes though, and a lot of wormhole corps have mini structures. I don't know what percentage of the 6 trillion from March was structures. If I had to guess, it would probably be around the same, although it might even be a little less because there's a lot of actual ships shooting each other in March, and February I would agree that a large chunk of that jump was just the let's go burn down every low power structure we can find.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe expanding a little on that last question, what's your view on how the introduction of citadels into wormhole space has affected the dynamics or has not affected the dynamics of what happens in wormhole space?
Initially and overall, I would say Citadel's introduction to wormhole space was a godsend. Passes were not ideal for managing. I guess it's probably a very nice way of talking about the joys that setting up and living in passes were. I think it lowered the entry bar, not necessarily ISK-wise, because an Astro House, as people love to point out, is more expensive than a POS. But in regards to how easy it is to manage a small corporation out of just an Astro House versus the headache that was hangar access and ship hangars and whoops, I forgot to tell my POS to even shoot stuff, so it's getting reinforced and not doing anything. I think it made it easier to move into wormholes. The first iteration of the vulnerability cycles made evictions a little tricky. I would say that it does, unfortunately, I feel still lean a little too far in the favor of the defender. Evictions are harder against a properly entrenched group because where with POSs, we could POS spam, but we're just going to sweep through and reinforce them all. And now with structures, you can find wormholes that have over 30 structures in them. And if those timers are spread out, you're looking at a real headache to try to remove people. It still happens. I mean, Wholesale, Hull Control, and Shekel had no problem going in and grinding down. I'm not actually sure how many structures possibly had, but I know they had a lot. And they did it, but it took them 2 weeks. The days of move in, blow up everything in 2 days, and move back out over a weekend, that's gone. Whether or not that's good or bad probably depends on who you are. From the perspective of a larger corp, it's annoying that we can't just, steamroll over corporations in a 48-hour window. But from the perspective of a smaller corp, I'm sure it's extremely helpful. Since the effort bar to evict you just got higher, it's easier for small groups to move in. And I think you're seeing it. That's one of the reasons. So it's easy to look at the big corps and just measure Wormhole's success based on their kill boards. But something that I would like to point out from the presentation is overall, there's just more corps. And most of those corps are very small compared to the very big ones. But it's easier for them to move in and start doing stuff. So I think overall, Citadels has had a very positive effect in that sense where it's just easier for corps to keep jumping in and setting up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got questions? Not even going to heckle me, my own corpies?
Heckle, heckle, heckle.
It is a nice scarf. A very nice person named Loresco gave it to me. You said your own name wrong yesterday. I thought that's what we were doing. Laura Secco let me borrow this scarf. I got my Novak shirt on. There's multiple corpse stickers on me, so we're representing wormhole space as best we can up here.
Do the figures show anything about any increase in industrial type things since moon mining was introduced? And more corps that way? Sorry, more targets that way?
It did. So I didn't have a Rorqual slide on here, which I should have. I shortened down my presentation a little bit because it's a little hard to always figure out exactly how long it'll take to get through it, and sometimes CCP rushes you and sometimes they don't. But more Rorquals are dying. There's more mining ships dying, so if anybody was wondering, are there more miners in wormhole space? There are. The data's a little hard to kind of pinpoint an exact answer, but I would say that overall, I think a lot more people are mining compared to what they used to be. I'm not super convinced yet that it's actually pulling people into wormhole space purely to mine, since as a miner, if you want to go just mine and make all the dank mining money, wormhole space moons aren't fantastic, and if you can get into nullsec, I'd say that's probably where a lot of people go. But what you do see is a lot of wormholers that are already here taking advantage of the moons they've got. So that's why you see corps losing Rorquals frequently in their home systems.
Hi.
Hello.
We've seen more activity in low class, a bit moving away from C5. Have you crunched the numbers on capital engagement specifically?
Capital engagements. I have them, but again, I didn't include them this year in one of the slides. Since we're done early, definitely should have. Capital engagements have shrunk over the past couple months in high class space, which I think is part and due to the number of corporations that live in high class space has decreased. And due to a lot of factors, what you're seeing is, again, we're seeing a lot of new smaller corps moving in, and they're moving into low-class space. Capital engagements in low-class space didn't quite shoot up either, though. Overall, the trend is actually still that more capitals are dying, but most of them, I think, are in high-class space. Most capitals that died were in for rolling purposes. I don't have an exact figure on that, since my data, the only thing I could try to do is guess based off of its value. The kill data that CCP supplies doesn't tell me what it was fit with or what it was doing while it died. I did look at and humorously discovered that a single corporation that I won't name lost not one and not two, but 3 carriers running Garista event sites in a C3. So there are people in low class using their capitals. As a cap pilot, you might be face palming at the way they're using their capitals, but low class capitals are being used more based on them dying. I mean, that's the other thing, is my data is purely focused on stuff dying. I don't easily have data to tell you if people are killing things with capitals more, and maybe their caps just aren't dying. But it's a much slower growth compared to that ISK spike and the kill spike. Capital usage hasn't quite spiked. March has a spike just because a lot of caps died in Hydra, but the overall trend is that you're still seeing growth, but it's very slow growth. But maybe one day CCP will give us a reason to use capitals again in high class space for running sites, and then you will see them dying everywhere again. That is definitely one of the things, though. If we take a step back and look at multiple years, less capitals are dying in wormholes than used to, mainly because there isn't as many use for them. If you're newer to wormhole space, a couple years ago, everybody ran sites using capital ships up in 5s and 6s because it was worth it to do so. And when they added the drifter and rebalanced capital escalations, that drive and the point of using them kind of disappeared. They're still fast. There's still lots of people in C6 space that run sites with capitals, but very few people in C5 space use capitals, as long as the current PvE meta is mainly nesters and rattlesnakes. that have the "oops, somebody's here, let's just leave" button, which was complained about frequently at the Wormhole Roundtable, and Fozzie said, yeah, that's a thing, and that was basically what we got. So we'll see on that. But yeah, cap use is sadly down, as long as we don't need to use them to kill drifters. Anybody else? Well, thanks everybody for coming out. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of FanFest, everybody.